January 12th, 1918, Berlin. A woman trades her wedding ring for a single loaf of turnip bread outside Alexanderplatz station. The bread weighs 400 grams. Her ring is 14-karat gold. Who decides these prices when a government is starving its own people? How do you survive when money becomes worthless and food becomes currency? What happens to a city when law dissolves into hunger? Germany enters its fourth winter of war, with food rations cut to 1,000 calories per day. The British naval blockade chokes supply lines. Turnips replace potatoes. Ersatz coffee tastes like burned grain. 2 million German civilians will die of malnutrition and disease before the armistice. Berlin becomes a laboratory of human desperation, where survival trumps every moral code the Reich once claimed to defend. The black market spreads through Berlin like an infection through dying tissue. Potsdamer Platz transforms into an open bazaar of illegal trade. Bread sells for 20 times the official price. A pound of butter costs more than a factory worker earns in 3 weeks. Housewives line up before dawn outside shops that have nothing to sell, then spend their afternoons trading family heirlooms for scraps of meat crawling with maggots. Bertha Schlesinger trades her grandmother's silver candlesticks for 6 pounds of horse meat on February 4th. The meat comes from cavalry horses killed in Belgium. It takes her 4 hours to walk from her apartment in Mitte to the dealer in Kreuzberg because the trams have no coal. She carries the meat home wrapped in newspaper dated 1914, back when Germany still believed it would win this war in 6 months. The dealers operate in plain sight because the police are hungry too. Sergeant Klaus Brenner of the 3rd Precinct takes bribes in potatoes instead of marks. A single potato buys immunity for 1 day of trading. 2 potatoes guarantee a week. Brenner weighs each potato on a jeweler's scale he confiscated from a Jewish shop on Rosenthaler Strasse. He records the transactions in a leather notebook that will later surface at his trial in 1919. Children become smugglers because they can slip through checkpoints that stop adults. 9-year-old Heinrich Müller carries contraband sugar from the docks to Charlottenburg hidden inside his schoolbooks. The sugar comes from confiscated Red Cross packages meant for German prisoners in France. Heinrich makes this run 16 times before British bombs flatten his route on March 21st. His body is never found. His mother waits for him at the kitchen table until American troops enter Berlin in 1945. The Kaiserin Augusta Victoria Hospital runs out of morphine on January 23rd. Dr. Werner Haas amputates frostbitten limbs with nothing but schnapps for anesthesia. The schnapps costs more than his monthly salary. He trades medical equipment on the black market to buy alcohol for surgeries. A single scalpel buys enough liquor to numb one patient for 30 minutes. The hospital's surgical saw purchases 4 bottles of grain alcohol that last until February. Rats become a delicacy sold openly in Hackischer Markt. The going rate is 3 marks per rat, cleaned and gutted. Children hunt them with sticks sharpened on broken glass. The biggest rats weigh 2 pounds and feed a family for 1 meal. Restaurant owners buy them by the dozen and serve them as a rabbit to customers who know better than to ask questions. The city's official rat population drops from an estimated 2 million to fewer than 50,000 in 6 months. Starvation changes the mathematics of survival. A wedding dress made of silk trades for enough flour to last 2 weeks. A violin crafted in Vienna exchanges for 5 pounds of lentils and a jar of pig fat. Children's shoes fit adult feet shrunk by malnutrition. Nothing is sacred when hunger turns human beings into walking skeletons who measure their remaining life in calories per day. If you value documented World War II and post-war history like this, subscribe. It is the best way to support our work. Now back to the story. The Imperial German Army requisitions civilian food supplies under Emergency Decree 479 on March 8th. Soldiers armed with bayonets empty private pantries and storage cellars across Berlin. They take everything edible, including pet food and birdseed. The decree makes hoarding punishable by death, but enforcement proves impossible when the enforcers are starving too. Colonel Franz Weber of the Berlin garrison trades requisitioned grain for his daughter's medicine. On the same day, he signs execution orders for civilian food hoarders. Women sell their hair outside barbershops on Unter den Linden. Human hair exports to neutral countries bring premium prices for wigs and mattress stuffing. A full head of blonde hair worth 6 months of meat rations. Brunette hair costs less, but still feeds a family for 3 weeks. Children watch their mothers emerge from barbershops bald and crying, clutching handfuls of cash that will buy survival for another month. The Tiergarten Zoo slaughters its animals one by one as winter deepens. The elephants die first, on February 16th. Each elephant provides 800 pounds of meat sold at 50 marks per pound. The lions last until March 2nd. Even the snakes and lizards find buyers willing to pay premium prices for protein that once entertained Sunday crowds. The zoo's final animal, a tuberculosis-infected monkey, dies of natural causes on March 19th. Its keeper eats it anyway. Factories stop production when workers collapse from hunger at their stations. The Krupp armaments plant in Charlottenburg reports productivity down 60% by February. Workers too weak to operate machinery trade industrial equipment for food, steel meant for artillery shells, becomes currency in a market where metal has value, but weapons do not. The plant's final shipment of completed shells leaves Berlin on March 12th. The boxcars carry turnips instead. Churches open their doors as soup kitchens, but have nothing to serve except watered-down broth made from bones boiled 6 times. Father Wilhelm Kohler of St. Hedwig Cathedral trades altar silver for ingredients that feed 200 people 1 meal per day. The cathedral's golden chalice, blessed by 3 popes, purchases enough barley to keep the soup kitchen open for 2 weeks. Communion wafers become the most nutritious food many parishioners consume all week. The black market creates its own aristocracy of survival. Maria Gross controls potato distribution in Schöneberg through a network of dealers who answer only to her. She weighs 400 pounds while children starve outside her warehouse. Her bodyguards carry clubs made from chair legs because bullets cost more than food. She dies of a heart attack on April 2nd while counting money that inflation renders worthless faster than she can stack it. Newspapers disappear from newsstands because people eat the paper when they run out of alternatives. Wallpaper paste made from potato starch becomes soup stock for families who have consumed everything else, including leather shoes boiled into broth. Books burn in fireplaces when coal supplies vanish. But people save cookbooks and agricultural manuals as hope for better times that may never arrive. The influenza pandemic hits Berlin in March like a second blockade delivered by nature instead of enemy ships. Weakened immune systems collapse under viral assault. Bodies pile up in hospital corridors because morgues overflow and gravediggers are too sick to work. The city government offers food rations for burial duty, but the dead outnumber volunteers by ratios that make proper burial impossible. Spring arrives but brings no relief because seeds saved for planting get eaten before they can grow. Victory gardens and city parks produce nothing except false hope. The soil is too damaged by industrial pollution to support crops. And fertilizer has been diverted to explosives production since 1915. Amateur farmers plant vegetables in containers filled with human waste, but most die of food poisoning before harvest season arrives. By April, the black market operates 24 hours per day because hunger never sleeps. Dealers work by moonlight and candle flame when electricity fails. Children too young for school learn to recognize the sound of approaching food trucks from blocks away. Elderly people who survived the Franco-Prussian War compare conditions unfavorably to the siege of Paris in 1870. Some remember that siege lasted 4 months. This one enters its 4th year with no end visible. The revolution begins on November 3rd, with hungry sailors refusing orders in Kiel, but Berlin's black market continues operating even as the government collapses. Dealers adapt to political chaos because starvation transcends ideology. Socialist revolutionaries and imperial loyalists buy from the same suppliers who care nothing for politics when survival is the only currency that matters. The market survives regime change because human need outlasts human institutions. Kaiser Wilhelm abdicates on November 9th and flees to Holland, but his abandoned palaces become distribution centers for black market goods. The throne room of the Berlin Palace houses grain dealers who set up shop between golden columns that once symbolized German power. Children play hide-and-seek in chambers where princes once held court while their parents negotiate terms for survival measured in grams and ounces. The armistice takes effect at 11 a.m. on November 11th. Church bells ring across Berlin for the first time in 4 years. But the celebration lasts only minutes because the naval blockade remains in place. British ships continue choking German supply lines until the peace treaty is signed 8 months later. The black market adapts to peacetime by adding former soldiers to its customer base. Veterans trade medals and weapons for food while trying to forget what they learned about killing in the trenches of France. Police records from the 4th Precinct reveal the mechanics of law enforcement collapse. Inspector Otto Zimmermann takes his final bribe on April 28th. 3 eggs and a jar of beef drippings from a dealer selling rotten fish to pregnant women. Zimmermann weighs 96 pounds down from 160 when the war began. His uniform hangs on his skeleton like cloth draped over coat hangers. He dies of typhus on May 3rd, still clutching the arrest warrant for the dealer who fed him. The city's hospital system disintegrates as medical professionals join the black market or die trying to work without supplies. Dr. Elizabeth Hartmann performs surgery with kitchen knives, sterilized over candle flames. She trades morphine intended for wounded soldiers to buy food for patients who are dying of starvation faster than their injuries. On March 27th, she operates on a child using a bread knife because her last scalpel bought medicine for 12 tuberculosis patients. Suicide rates spike to levels not recorded before or since in German history. The Berlin Municipal Registry logs 437 confirmed suicides in March alone. Compared to 18 in March 1914, Families choose death together rather than watch children starve individually. The Schneider family of Prenzlauer Berg takes poison on April 9th after their last furniture sells for enough food to survive 2 more days. Their suicide note lists the weights of each family member at death. Father, 89 pounds. Mother, 71 pounds. Daughter, 32 pounds. Coal shortages force Berliners to burn furniture, books, and clothing to stay warm. But fuel becomes too precious for cremating bodies. Mass graves in Friedrichshain Cemetery hold thousands of corpses buried without coffins because wood costs more than most families earn in 6 months. Gravediggers demand payment in food before they will dig. The cemetery's final burial records, kept until April 16th, show an average of 63 interments per day in graves designed for 12. Transportation networks collapse when draft horses are slaughtered for meat and train engines lack coal to operate. The Berlin subway system shuts down on March 19th. Trams stop running on March 25th. Citizens walk everywhere, but walking burns calories that most cannot afford to lose. Distance becomes measured in energy expenditure rather than kilometers. A journey from Mitte to Charlottenburg costs 1 meal's worth of calories. Most people never travel beyond walking distance from their food sources. The German mark loses 90% of its value between January and April as inflation spirals beyond government control. Workers demand payment in goods rather than currency. A day's wages buy less food than a child can eat in one sitting. Employers offer turnips and ersatz instead of money. The Siemens Electrical Works pays employees in coal dust and potato peelings. Currency becomes useful only as kindling or toilet paper. Cannibalism emerges in isolated cases documented by police reports sealed until 1968. The Gruber family in Wedding is arrested on April 4th for butchering their elderly neighbor and selling the meat as pork. Mrs. Gruber claims the neighbor died of natural causes before they carved the body. The investigating officer notes in his report that the family shows no signs of madness, only hunger. They receive death sentences commuted to life imprisonment when the new government takes power. Children adapt to starvation with survival instincts that horrify adults. 12-year-old Anna Richter leads a gang of 23 street children who steal from corpses and trade with black market dealers. They sleep in bombed buildings and eat rats, pigeons, and anything else that moves. Anna weighs 38 pounds when Allied relief supplies reach Berlin in July 1919. She survives and immigrates to America in 1923, becoming a nurse who spends her career feeding hospital patients. The Imperial German government attempts to control black market prices through Decree 587 issued on February 14th, but enforcement proves impossible when judges and prosecutors are clients of the dealers they are supposed to prosecute. Judge Wilhelm Kruger sentences black market operators to prison terms, then buys food from their associates using confiscated evidence. Court records show Kruger weighs 108 pounds at his final sentencing hearing on April 21st. Industrial production ceases entirely by April as factories become warehouses for black market goods. The massive AEG electrical plant in Moabit houses grain dealers who sell government wheat stolen from military supplies. Workers dismantle machinery to trade iron and steel for food. The plant's final production report, dated April 10th, lists 0 completed products and inventories of raw materials sold or consumed by starving employees. Religious institutions abandon spiritual concerns for temporal survival. Pastor Hermann Dyke of Kaiser Wilhelm Gedächtniskirche trades communion wine for vegetables and uses church silver to buy medicine for dying parishioners. His sermon notes from March show less theology and more practical advice about identifying edible plants and cooking leather shoes. The church's organ pipes, made of tin, sell for enough flour to feed the congregation for 3 days. Women resort to prostitution not for money but for food, creating a barter economy where sexual services exchange directly for calories. The going rate on Friedrichstrasse is 1 night for 2 pounds of bread. Disease spreads rapidly through this population as medical care disappears and hygiene becomes impossible without soap or clean water. Police arrest prostitutes for illegal trading but lack prisons with food to keep them alive during incarceration. The black market develops its own justice system when government authority vanishes. Dealers who sell poisoned food face execution by customers too desperate to wait for legal justice. Wilhelm Gross of Neukölln is beaten to death on April 7th by mothers who bought spoiled milk that killed their infants. His body hangs from a streetlight for 3 days as a warning to other dealers. No police investigate because the precinct station closed when its last officer died of influenza. Secret government files released in 1989 reveal that Kaiser Wilhelm knew the blockade would cause mass starvation, but continued the war because surrender meant losing his throne. His diary entry from February 12th, 1918 reads, "Better a dead empire than a democratic Germany." The Kaiser ate 4 meals per day while issuing proclamations about shared sacrifice. His chefs prepared banquets using ingredients confiscated from Berlin hospitals and orphanages. International Red Cross attempts to deliver food aid meet with German military interference designed to maintain war morale. General Erich von Falkenhayn orders the confiscation of relief supplies intended for civilians. The supplies are redirected to military units or sold on the black market by officers who pocket the profits. Red Cross workers document the theft, but cannot stop it without armed escorts that neutral Switzerland will not provide. The influenza pandemic claims victims already weakened by months of starvation, creating a death rate unprecedented in modern European history. Berlin's influenza mortality rate reaches 47% compared to 3% in London. Bodies stack like cordwood outside overwhelmed hospitals. The city government stops issuing death certificates on March 30th because municipal clerks are dead or too sick to work. Accurate casualty figures become impossible to calculate. Ersatz foods, made from sawdust, bark, and industrial chemicals cause widespread poisoning that hospitals cannot treat without medicine or staff. Ersatz coffee contains roasted acorns ground with sand. Ersatz sausage is made from newspaper soaked in animal fat. Children develop scurvy from diets consisting entirely of turnips and artificial supplements. The municipal health department issues warnings about food safety that no one can afford to heed. Foreign correspondents smuggle reports past German censors describing conditions that Allied governments use for propaganda but not relief efforts. Swedish journalist Lars Andersson writes on March 15th, "Berlin resembles a medieval plague city where the living envy the dead." His reports reach Stockholm but generate no humanitarian aid because neutral countries fear German submarine attacks on relief ships. The revolution spreads from port cities to Berlin as mutinous soldiers join forces with starving civilians. Revolutionary councils form in neighborhoods where black markets operate, creating dual power structures that compete with imperial authority. The councils promise food distribution, but deliver only chaos as competing factions fight over scarce resources. Violence becomes another currency in a city where everything has a price measured in survival. Social hierarchies collapse as aristocrats sell family heirlooms to survive alongside factory workers and street children. Countess Marie von Stauffen trades her grandmother's diamond tiara for 6 loaves of bread on April 20th. She dies of pneumonia 4 days later in a charity hospital that has no heat, medicine, or food for patients. Her funeral draws 3 mourners and lasts 15 minutes because the priest faints from hunger. The German army begins disintegrating as soldiers desert to feed their families or die at their posts. Regiment 94 of the Berlin garrison reports 50% casualties from disease and malnutrition by April 1st. Officers shoot deserters when they have ammunition and energy. But most lack both. Military discipline dissolves when commanders are too weak to enforce orders and troops are too hungry to obey them. Banking systems fail as currency becomes worthless, and precious metals get traded for food faster than institutions can track ownership. The Deutsche Bank's Berlin headquarters closes on April 22nd when employees stop reporting to work. Safety deposit boxes are looted by starving customers who break down vault doors with hammers and crowbars. Gold and jewelry disappear into black markets where their value is measured against bread and potatoes rather than international exchange rates. The final secret emerges from British Admiralty files released in 1974. The blockade was designed not just to starve Germany into submission, but to create social conditions that would guarantee political revolution. First Sea Lord John Fisher wrote to Prime Minister Lloyd George on January 4th, 1918, "Hunger will accomplish what our armies cannot." The black markets of Berlin were not accidents of war, but weapons of war, engineered by policymakers who understood that empty stomachs topple governments more efficiently than artillery shells. Berlin's municipal records, discovered in 1991 beneath rubble from World War II bombing, show the final toll. Between January and November 1918, the city's population dropped from 4.2 million to 3.1 million. Disease claimed 400,000. Starvation took 500,000. The rest fled or simply disappeared into mass graves that were never properly marked.